you have an artistic background or a design background in general, you can always find something else and still be engaged while you're still looking for a good fit for a company. So I think I actually think graphic design students are set up really well, because there's a lot of options between graphic design or web and app design.
Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the Design Rescue Show. I am your host, David Block, and today I'm thrilled to introduce a UX designer and a visionary product design leader, Jen Jernigan. Welcome to the show, Jen.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be on the show. Looking forward to talking all about my design career and everything that's led up to today.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. So, as you know, basically the show is about taking a trip, a behind the scenes journey, kind of through your career. And what I like to do is I like to go back as far as I can and start off with, your inspiration, what started you off, and then your schooling. And before we get to that, to kick things off, I'd really like to know if you could describe your current role at Apple. And I know that you just started there
Mhm.
not too long ago. I'd love to know if you could share with us your daily responsibilities and what your role is there.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about the work that I do. I can't speak to any specifics because it's Apple. I am a contractor, and so I work full time as a contractor at Apple. I'm also not a representative of Apple. Um, uh, so on a day-to-day basis, I work as a designer, product designer, working on websites and generally, I would say interfaces. And I also work with engineers, I work with producers, and I create layouts and think about the navigation and the experience of what a user might do when they navigate through an application.
Got it. I see. Okay. Excellent. Now, as I was going through your resume, I noticed that you've gone from UX design to product design and staying in that range. And I'm curious if you could kind of give us an overview of what is the difference between product design and UX design? What would the difference be?
Yeah, we use them pretty interchangeably right now. There's definitely not a huge difference. Product designers typically work with product teams, and so a product designer is I would say, primary contact on a product team. There's typically one person for each team, and they work with cross-functionally with different individuals. So they will have usually a product manager, which is responsible for business objectives and goals, and then they'll work with engineers and maybe a QA person, so quality assurance, and then perhaps a writer. And then there might be a subject matter expert that they also work with on projects. And so it's not a hard label, I would say, or a hard title in terms of what the difference is. There's some people who call themselves UX designers and they do almost the same exact job. And there are other people who call themselves product designers. But generally, product designers are, I would say, more broadly experienced. And so they might have a background in research as well, or they might not only work on websites, they could work on applications, so mobile apps. They may work on voice technology as well, and pretty much a variety of surfaces or different experiences.
I see. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for that. So now I'd like to know when you first got started, what was it that inspired you to become a designer or to pursue a career in design? Was there anything in particular that jumped out at you?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to high school. I actually took a sewing class in high school, and I stayed in that sewing class, and I took like a more advanced sewing class, so similar to what you have now for graphic design. I went into sewing, and then I got really interested in fashion design, and then I took several classes actually in college, and got pretty heavy into pattern making, so creating patterns so that clothing can be created, or structure so that clothing can be created. And after that, I kind of gradually got into art and design a little bit more. And I can stop there or I can keep going.
Well, that's a good intro into the design. So yeah, now you said you went to CalArts, and the looking back on your education, I'd like to know. Sometimes I ask the question like, well, what sort of projects did you work on and things like that. I think the more important question would be, looking back on your time there, was there a takeaway or something that you've integrated into your current routine?
Yeah, so CalArts is an art school. There are well, it's a traditional art school, so many different types of art happen in the school, which means it draws a lot of different types of people, anywhere from actors all the way through, I would say, visual artists or conceptual artists, ceramicists, and also photography, dance. Like, it's a very broad education. The design program is where I landed, and I was very much interested in graphic design. I actually had an AA previously before going to CalArts. I got an AA in graphic design. I was very interested in creating layouts. And so when I got to CalArts, I knew it was an established school, it was a really good school, started by Walt Disney many years ago. And really, I guess my main takeaways from there that I use on a day-to-day basis is still the tradition or the traditional design principles. So I'm sure you go through that with your students. Both design principles and I would say just general practices, layout, typography, color, shape, form, um, balance, all of those principles that you would learn about are very applicable to web design, because web and app design is still on a grid. And so that's usually more advanced for graphic design students. However, all of our applications are made on a grid as well. And so when you look at websites, you'll see the browser, and then there's a grid within that browser that is invisible to everyone. But you can also take that grid and it'll scale down slightly. So it starts like this. It gradually scales down for tablet, and then it scales down even more. So if you've ever dragged your window and you see that shifting, that's because it's on a grid. And so um, of course, we still use grids, and I think that's about it. Um, but it was a great experience. It was a very difficult school. I can say that. It was challenging. Yeah, it was really difficult, but
Yeah,
it was a
for
good
sure, for
program.
sure. How did you land your first professional role, and what were some of the initial challenges that you met as a new designer?
Mm. It was easier back then than it is now to get a job. I'll say that. My first role was actually in a fashion company, and I was working on the first mobile website. And so this was actually before responsive design, which is what I was describing with like a web browser scaling. There was this understanding that there would be just desktop or larger screens, and then there would be one website for mobile. And the way that I landed it is I submitted my resume, I submitted my application, I think online, yeah, online, and then I got a call and they asked me a few questions. They had me come in and they asked me a few more questions. They said, "You're hired." So it's pretty straightforward. It wasn't a huge long process at that point. And so it was pretty nice.
If you're enjoying this video, please take a moment to hit that like button, leave a comment below, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our future videos. Thank you. Now, looking at your time with companies like Airbnb and Hulu, I'm curious if you could share a project that was particularly challenging or rewarding.
Ooh, okay. I have a few projects. I'll talk about Airbnb because I feel like people usually like to hear a little bit more about Airbnb. And it's an interesting story because of the time that it happened. So, when I joined Airbnb, I was focusing on with working with earlier teams, and so starting designs that hadn't existed yet. And previously, I'd worked on what we call growth, which is how to encourage people to use products and also sign up to products. And so when I got to Airbnb, they were starting this idea of the experiences. I think they still call it the experiences. I haven't checked in a while, I should know. But so Airbnb has their housing, and but they also have these experiences, or at the time we were also calling it adventures, or two teams for that. And the experiences are when someone joins a host for either a trip or a short, what I call a workshop or class, and the host can take them through some type of journey. And so it could be a surf class, right? Or it could be a camping trip. And previously, there were only homes. And so we had to come up with different types of arrangements and think about the travel and the destination of a user or someone who would be using this new experience and the information that they needed to take away. And so, for example, when we talked to people, we learned that people were very interested in the adventures. And so, going on a multi day trip where it was overnight stay, but they didn't know what the accommodations were. And so, they didn't know where they were sleeping. They wanted to know if they were sleeping in a bed or if they were sleeping in a tent or where they would use the restroom, right? And so, was there a restroom? And so, we had to come up with all these different combinations to help people understand the type of trip that they would be taking, and then lay it out on the web on the page and on a day-to-day basis, and say day one, this is what you'll do. Day two, this is what you can expect, and even down to food. So that was a pretty interesting project and also a newer team. Um, and and that went right until the pandemic, and then we scaled the team down. So that was also interesting as well.
Oh, wow.
Because of course, yeah, with something like experiences, we had to shut down, or most we had to shut down when COVID came about. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So what happened to that? Basically, it didn't put you out of business. You had to just approach it from a different point of view, right?
Yeah, well, several of us were laid off, and so I was included in that. And then additionally, we the team went to web based, and so they started doing like shows that are much like this. And so it was live with a host, which is also like a great idea. I think it was actually really cool because there were some really interesting hosts that brought on their own shows. And so that there was one who was like cooking with grandma in Italy, and she was a fantastic chef, and so she would show people how to make pasta. And so that was something really fun and interesting for people to do during, lockdown when everyone was shut inside. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. So now you've led teams in creating user-focused design solutions. Can you talk about a project where your team collaboration was crucial? And what was the project, and what role did you play in fostering that teamwork?
Yeah, every project. Every project, because, since our teams are what we call cross-functional, and we have many different people on them, every single project we have to collaborate a lot, and, it's a group effort, and it's usually not one person just making a decision. It's usually several people, having a conversation about it, and then coming to an understanding of what needs to happen next. And so it's hard for me to pinpoint like which project would I choose, but that's generally how it goes with every project. And so that's what it is. Yeah.
Now, you recently gave a lecture that was titled
Mhm.
"The Rise of Wearables," and I'd like to know where you discussed AI-powered personal devices and how they could transform customer experience. Can you highlight some features of these devices that could significantly change how customers interact with brands?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So there's some really interesting devices that are coming out. I am very excited about them. One is a little bit more well known, and when I say that, there's probably just a few people who know about, a few thousand people who know about it. So one is, well, I'll start with the general category. They are wearables. So wearables historically means that you can wear a watch on your body, Now the devices that are coming out are actually clipping onto shirts typically, and there are several of these. One of my favorite is called Rabbit, and so these devices are clipped to someone's clothing, and it's basically powered by voice, so voice technology, and then there's also uh, an AI agent or AI, I'll say, assistant who is helping in any way that they can. And so if you say like, "Oh, I want to learn more about this musician," the rabbit or the AI agent is what we call them, will give you more information about that musician. They might help you create uh, a trip. And so if you had multiple destinations, it might help you create a trip for that. It can just generally record information as well. And so if you were interested in documenting a trip or going outside and taking video, it can document that as well. But it is moving away heavily from what I would say a typical interface that we were looking at today,
Mhm.
into more voice activated. That's one of them. There are also other technologies that are coming out using AI, so using artificial intelligence. And there's another, I'll call it, it's more of an application, although it can be an operating system as well, which I'm forgetting the name right now. But it basically shape shifts. And so you type in a question or you ask a question, and the interface is going to display and change based on what information you tell it. And so instead of going to a website, now the interface is doing that for you. And so it's a little bit of a different approach. And that sounds really vague. I understand, like it sounds hard to understand what that is. But essentially, there aren't any websites, and it's just this operating system changing to give you different information. And so it's a completely new experience and pretty cool new stuff coming out. Also, just very different, um, some really great application and operating systems happening. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. My next question in related to that is what challenges or ethical considerations should businesses consider when they're integrating AI powered wearables into their product line?
Yeah, privacy is a big one. We're
Right.
seeing many more customers, users care about privacy and where their data is going. And this is also a difficult conversation to have because I often feel like privacy isn't really exposed. The level of data a company can capture isn't really exposed to the user. And so generally, when people talk about privacy, what they mean is any information that is personal, that is leveraged by a business, and it sometimes it's sold to other companies. Sometimes it's used internally um, to create new products, which could be a good thing, but it can also be used more broadly in other ways, which could be to attract someone to buy something they may or may not need, right? So,
Yeah.
but to give a good idea of like the harmful effects. Well, one, um, I think privacy is a difficult subject because we type a lot of information into these systems that we're using, and generally, the operating systems that we use are pretty protected. And so Google and Apple historically have been really good about their privacy policies. But other websites, other applications can literally do anything they want with that data, pretty much, as long as you sign up for the application. So it may not seem like a big deal, but websites are designed or applications are designed to hold a lot of information about one particular person,
Mhm.
and they are now being leveraged, and so that's what those algorithms are doing, right? So you take TikTok. Say I'm really interested in green shoes, or I want to learn more about green shoes. If I type in green shoes, I'll start to see more content come up about green shoes. And I'm saying green shoes specifically because it's kind of a oddball thing to pick. But the more information you give a system, the more it can learn about you. And then more broadly, when you start thinking about that in the tens of millions of people, you can really start to study. Um, I would say you can start to look at what people are broadly interested in, which is fascinating. But it's also like, should we be leveraging all this information to really know what people are interested in on a daily basis? And generally, there is information that's stripped away, like typically name, birth date is stripped away, and so this information is kind of anonymous, but it is also captured in a way that it is for an individual. So they can strip away like really, really personal information, but they're still looking at trends of what you're searching, what you're browsing, and then they will use that to keep you locked in to using these applications, which may lead to addiction. So it's like two things. It's like privacy, but also some of the applications that we've seen in the past have been highly addictive. And I think that's probably safe to say about TikTok as well and Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. So now I'm curious actually if you have any, now this is probably going down a road that now neither of us could answer. I'm curious if you know what's coming next. Like what would you assume the AI community can look forward to next?
Ooh, okay. So there's tons happening. My favorite thing right now is actually video.
Oh,
Um, yes, there are some amazing developments which people just aren't aware of happening with video. So we know about generative imagery, right? But video is being generated too, and it is amazing because now we're starting to see those images move into motion, and you can take any destination. You can have like a bird's eye view or like a satellite. You can have more of a camera focus. You can zoom in and out on a subject, and so just some really interesting things coming through there. There's also a lot of interesting developments in health. One of my favorite things that is happening right now for AI is that there are a few companies who are leveraging AI to look at huge databases of skin cancer, and then yeah, and so it's basically studying skin cancer, studying early stages of skin cancer, and then being able to detect skin cancer much earlier than a doctor would be able or a physician would be able to. So that's like those are the cool things that are happening, like very opposite ends of like, okay, like one's really cool because it's video, and then the other one's like, oh, this is actually helpful. This is really substantially helpful in the world. Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Now, my final question is, and we've made it right to the end. And my last question is, what advice would you give high school students who are exploring the possibility of a career in product design or UX UI?
Yeah. Well, number one, having a foundation in graphic design is wonderful. It will set you up for success when you start interviewing with companies, or even if you decide to go to college or not. That is wonderful. And so I think the next thing is just trying to find a mentor in general to help you learn more about the industry or companies you might be interested in. There are different types of companies, and so just like different types of colleges typically have like a kind of different cultures or personalities. Same thing with companies as well.
Mhm.
I tend to like to work in smaller groups, and so sometimes early teams or startups, and so um, it just kind of depends on where someone might want to go. I think also, let's see, talk about graphic design, talk about mentor. It will be challenging getting in right now. We have a lot of product designers. There's a lot of people who are very interested in UX and product design, but also having a plan B or a backup plan of like what you want to do. So if you have an artistic background or a design background in general, you can always find something else and still be engaged while you're still looking for a good fit for a company. So I think I actually think graphic design students are set up really well, because there's a lot of options between graphic design or web and app design as well.
Excellent. That's fantastic advice. And on that note, I want to thank you once again for being a part of the show and spending some time with us. It was really nice to get to know you. And thank you, Jen.
Thank you so much. It was great, and I and I really enjoyed this, and I hope one day I get to visit your classroom too because it looks super cool there.